Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. Our final live show of the week coming up today. The title of the episode is Bob's Big Mad. Attorney General Bob Ferguson's office would like some corrections from us, so we'll go through all the corrections that they desire, shall we? Also, an update on the Fifth Avenue Theater, our accusation that they were being racist against white people. They have responded, and also someone's been unblocked on Twitter. Exciting day for me. Plus, Jay Inslee's unbelievable lack of self-awareness. The Seattle Police Department is entering a new and long overdue chapter. And also to close the show today, some advice or words of wisdom, rather, from Coach Joe Kennedy on disagreement. I think you'll find it quite valuable. Before we get to all that, it's a big day on the podcast today. Nicole, you don't seem excited over there.
Oh, I'm excited. It's been a busy morning.
It's been a busy morning. That's okay. I'm all wired up on caffeine after weeks of anticipation, hard work.
Yes.
Today we have launched our unDivided merch store. Oh, it's good. We are calling the offerings the Common Sense Collection. We hope every single one of you will don one of our apparel items from the Common Sense Collection so you can be out in the community letting everyone know that you have more common sense than they do. We have t-shirts, we have bumper stickers, we have hats, we've got mugs, we've got it all.
And I like to say this. Removable bumper stickers.
Removable.
It doesn't decrease the value of your vehicle.
Yeah, twice. I mean, when you remove it, you could probably put it back on once. But if you want to remove it one day because you decide you hate the podcast.
Well, it says the year. No, it says a year. So, in 2028, you might want to take
we'll just do the Common Sense 2028
collection.
We'll
just have a new one for you. Exactly.
Correct. And also, I will note that subscribers to the podcast will get a $5 discount on their order. So be on the lookout for that promo code, which we will not state publicly because it's top secret, only for Undivided subscribers. So you can check out the merch store starting today, undividedpod.com. All right, let's get to one of the grossest, most disturbing, but also not surprising stories we've had on the podcast in a while. There was some anticipation about the University of Washington releasing a study that has to do with the amount of drug residue present on public transportation. So, look, we know that people are using buses, trains as drug dens. I mean, again, it goes back to what I said about the fentanyl crisis. I don't need data to show me that. I know that there's drug residue on all of this. I don't need UW necessarily to do a study. However, the results of the study are pretty startling and pretty unequivocal. So the title of the study, Assessing Fentanyl and Methamphetamine in the Air and on Surfaces of Transit Vehicles. It says UW, and first of all, kudos to UW for even doing this study, because they knew what it was going to show, I imagine. UW researchers analyzed the findings from 78 air samples and 102 surface samples collected from transit vehicles. Of the 78 air samples, 25% had detectable fentanyl and 100% had detectable methamphetamine. 100% of the air samples had detectable methamphetamine. Of the 102 surface samples, 46% had detectable fentanyl and 98% had detectable meth. They go on to say, detection of fentanyl or meth by the lab does not mean it poses a health risk to operators or the riding public. So you might be wondering, well, why did they even do this, right? What is the genesis for this? So, of course, there was concern among not only public transportation riders, but the folks who operate and sit in these buses or on these trains all day because they see what's happening. They're like, am I going to be okay? If you got people smoking meth or doing fentanyl on your bus every single day, a common sense person would be like, what does that mean for my health? So what UW said is that 2 years ago, some operators started reporting more and more instances of people smoking drugs on their vehicles, and they worried that it would create long-lasting, lingering health impacts, which again is just common sense. So spurred by those concerns, 5 transit agencies 4 of them in Washington, 1 in Oregon, reached out to UW and said, hey, can you study this? And the yes or no question they wanted answered is, were transit operators being exposed to drug smoke or residue in their workplace? So UW says that it can't come right now to a definitive answer as to whether this is going to have long-term health impacts, because this, they say, is a first of its kind study. But they say nearly all the positive samples contained small amounts that are unlikely to cause acute medical conditions, but it remains unclear if consistent long-term exposure, such as the long-term exposure that's happening to bus drivers who are working 40 hours a week. They say it's unclear because we don't know, we have to study this longer, whether there are long-term implications. How would you feel if you're a bus driver? And you're like, you already know this is happening, right? Because you see people or you try to stop people from doing drugs out in the open on these transits. And the 5 transit facilities that, or entities that reached out, King County Metro, Sound Transit, Everett Transit, Community Transit in Snohomish County, and TriMet in Portland. So again, that comes as no surprise to me, but when you've got 100% of air samples that are showing that there's meth, that means every person who goes on those trains and those buses, every operator is sitting in there breathing in methamphetamine. And do we need any more indication that we are in the midst of a drug crisis, that all these other societal issues that we have going on, homelessness, mental health issue, crime crisis, it's caused by drugs. Drugs are at the center of it. It has infiltrated every aspect of society, and they want to get us out of our cars? Hell to the no. Like, unless those things are coming up clean, I ain't going on a bus for anything. So just thought we'd update you because that was a highly anticipated study, and it dropped today, and all the media in Seattle was all excited about it. And hopefully this spurs some change and some recognition that, okay, we cannot allow public transportation to be a de facto drug den if we would like people to take public transportation. Okay, a story I just want to touch on briefly because it gets a little bit into the weeds. Sorry, I'm trying to get my hair out of my face today. It gets a little bit, oh, don't worry, only 2 weeks left before the wedding, and then I can cut my hair again. So a long time ago when I first came to Seattle, there was a piece of video that really launched the Seattle Police Department into a prolonged period of federal oversight. There were a couple things going on. There was the shooting of a Native American woodcarver who had a knife in his hand. There was the infamous, quote, Mexican piss incident where you had a detective named Shandy Cobain who was accused of stomping on the head of an individual who wasn't even the person they were looking for, saying, I will beat the effing Mexican piss out of you, homie, you feel me? That's like the line that was captured by an independent journalist. And it launched SPD into this whole period of reform. And look, I believe that police departments and police officers need to be held to the highest extent possible when it comes to our standards for them. They have the power of life and death over people. They have the power to enforce laws, to take your freedom away. And of course, they need to be held to a high standard. Now, I have some issues with the way what's called the consent decree has played out, but I should note that today, the judge has lifted the majority of the federal oversight of the Seattle Police Department. This according to Fox 13 SPD consent decree. Judge lifts most federal oversight of the Seattle Police Department. Mayor Bruce Harrell released a statement after this came down late yesterday. Judge Robart agreed with the city and the Department of Justice that our Seattle Police Department had achieved sustained compliance with most requirements of the federal consent decree, closing out significant portions of the consent decree and allowing our community and police service to move into the next phase of reform. Judge Robart's ruling is a critical milestone in our efforts to reform policing. It recognizes the significant changes in our approach to crime, behavioral health incidents, and professional standards. I'm grateful for the excellent work of our police officers that brought us to this point. I am also thankful for the people of Seattle who have, from the beginning of this journey 12 years ago, wanted a police service that is fair, respectful, and effective in keeping everyone safe in every neighborhood. But I would ask you whether the police department that came out on the back end of this, again, 12 years, millions, tens and tens of millions of dollars later, if it truly is a better, more effective police department. I think the answer in some ways is no. First of all, we have a deployable police department of fewer than 900 officers. We're down 600 to 700 from where we should be. And for that reason, it has become less effective. Part of that is frustration over the consent decree, of officers feeling like they were constantly working under the thumb of the federal government, under unfair levels of political scrutiny, and you had many officers who left as a result of that. I also think that with the vilification of officers that has happened over the past 10 years, I think that you have had to reduce standards for hiring in a way that is going to ultimately lead to more of the very same issues that the federal consent decree was launched over in the first place. Now, again, some of the additional training that officers have to go through, de-escalation, and I do think training has improved. I don't know that there's a ton of officers who would disagree with that. I'm sure there are some who think they have to go through too much training as a result of the consent decree, but I think if you're a police officer, more training is probably always better. But I just think over the 12 years, I remember being a young reporter in Seattle covering these issues and the consent decree, and we would do stories on just the utter waste of money that, there was a monitor that would come in and oversee the agreement between the police department and the federal government, and they were spending all sorts of money on stuff I didn't think they should be spending money on. And so I think this has been a huge financial suck for the city of Seattle. I think it could have ended years ago, if not for the political sort of issues that were happening in 2020. So we'll see what, if any, impact this has on the Seattle Police Department's ability to recruit and retain officers now that they can, for the most part, be able to sort of do what they're supposed to do without this constant concern of the federal government's intervention. But for folks who have been following that narrative for 12 years, I thought it would be good to update you on that. So I'm sure the city of Seattle and the Seattle Police Department are very happy to be out from under the feds. All right, quick story on the gas price debacle. Things are only getting worse, people. And remember what Todd Myers with the Washington Policy Center told us on the show a couple weeks ago. If you think gas prices are bad this year because of the carbon program, cap and trade program, next year is going to be one hell of a wake-up call for people who aren't already upset by this. So, as part of this cap and trade program, they have these carbon auctions, right? And you can go in and you can purchase your carbon offsets. And the state government is just raking in hundreds of millions of dollars over this. And their auction, the price per metric ton continues to skyrocket, which results in higher gas prices. So this is the latest update from Todd Myers, who, remember, he's the one who predicted exactly what the auctions would mean for gas prices for you and I. He said the price of Washington's tax on CO2 has jumped again, reaching $63.03 per metric ton, a 12% jump from the last auction. This amounts to an increase of about 50 cents per gallon of gas and 61 cents per gallon of diesel. The high price triggers another special auction. So whenever the price jumps too high, they try to have another auction to try to bring it back down, but it's just not happening. And so his prediction now is that since this began at the beginning of the year, we're now going to be up 50 cents per gallon as a direct result of the carbon tax and Jay Inslee's cap and trade program. And he was only 1 cent off. Was it 1 cent off in January? So now he's updating his estimate. I imagine that he's going to be spot on because he's one of the only ones who's been consistently honest and accurate about this very issue. I would also note, I thought it was interesting, our friend Ori Hoffman had Senator Mark Mullet, who's a Democrat running for governor, on his show. And Senator Mark Mullet is against the cap and trade program. He thinks that, against it is loose because he ultimately ended up voting for it. But he believed, it gets a little in the weeds, but he believed that they would cap the price of the offsets to match California's. Washington didn't do that, so that's why we're seeing all of this happen at a really profound rate. So he called for Jay Inslee, again, a governor of his own party, to call a special session to deal with this issue, to call a special session to fix the cap and trade program so it isn't resulting in exceptionally high gas prices for all of us. And the governor's office has said they don't plan to do that. So you have a Democrat who says, hey, this is so bad, we need to fix this. Surely it wasn't your intent to have these auctions, the price goes so high and the price at the pump goes so high, we have to come back and fix this. And Ari Hoffman followed up with the governor's office and they told him there are no plans to call a special session. All right, coming up next, Bob Ferguson's office emailed me this morning. They would like some corrections. Not one, not two, but 3 corrections. So we're going to go through the email and see if corrections are warranted, because I am nothing if not fair. And while I give my opinion, I do want to make sure that it is factually sound. So we'll have an update on that next. But first, we've been talking about Wes Jones, a wonderful real estate agent in our area. And I have heard some awesome Wes Jones success stories. We talked to Susan in Federal Way. She wanted to sell her house, lived there for 25 years, but she's like, this thing needs some work. She didn't have the money to fix it. She didn't have the time to fix it. So she called a couple real estate agents. And then she remembered, well, maybe I should call Wes Jones, because he's got something called the Listing Boost Concierge Service, where they'll come in and handle all this for me so I don't have to deal with it. Wes got right back to her and got to work.
I knew I had to paint. I knew I needed to get new flooring. I needed to get new lighting. I told him up front that I was very interested, that I did not have the time or the finances to do what needed to be done. And he immediately jumped in with, well, I do. Work started immediately. And I would say in 2 to 3 weeks, they had landscaping done. They had all the painting done. The new floors were put in. All the lighting was put in. It just was all so fast. And the rest is history. It was on the market for 7 days. I was able to get well over listing price.
To be specific, Susan got 20 offers, sold it for 15% over list price, and ended up getting $200,000 more than an investor offered her before the renovations. Yeah, how great is that? Just one call to Wes Jones, $200,000 more than she would have otherwise gotten. Wes Jones and his team have a lot of other unique services that they provide that you won't find with other real estate agents. So check them out, sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com. You can start by simply using their home value calculator. Plug your address in, see how much your home is worth. It might be worth more than you think. Sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. Bob Ferguson is big mad. I think we're grating on him a little bit. I think we're getting on his nerves a little bit. But here's the thing. This is a guy who has been training his entire adult life and working toward the governor's office. He's finally running for governor. I think in 2 days he makes his exploratory campaign official. And we will absolutely point out all the reasons why he is not fit to be the next governor of our state. I don't care how long you've dreamed of being governor. I don't care how many political rungs you've climbed along the way. There are things that he has done in the way he operates that I believe make him bad for the state. I think he's a continuation of Jay Inslee, and so I'm not going to be shy on my opinion of it. We need a break. We need a break from that brand of politics. We don't need a whole overhaul in the state. We need a course correction. And that course correction is not going to come from Bob Ferguson. So on the show last week, I talked about Bob Ferguson sending a letter to Merrick Garland about the fentanyl crisis. And he wanted 3 cities in Washington state, I believe it was Everett, Spokane, and Yakima, to be part of this federal task force operation to interrupt the fentanyl crisis, which I agreed with the sentiments in the letter. Washington state has the worst fentanyl crisis in the country. I agree that those 3 cities in particular are prime targets for the drug cartel. I agree with all of it. What I take issue with is he has not done a single thing, in my opinion, I'll qualify it that way, to make the fentanyl crisis better. In fact, his silence on key issues related to public safety have directly allowed for the fentanyl crisis to get worse. One of them I noted is the fact that he's filed, 90 now lawsuits against the Trump administration, bragged about all of them, bragged about his record, and a lot of them had to do with issues around immigration and border security. Here's a clip from my segment last week. When Trump was in office, how many times did we hear Bob Ferguson talk about all the times he'd sued the Trump administration? How many of those lawsuits had to do with issues related to the southern border and to immigration that had nothing at all to do with making the southern border more secure, so drugs weren't trafficked up to Washington state, that had to do with holding the Mexican drug cartel accountable so that drugs didn't come to Washington state. None of them. He had lawsuits pertaining to border wall funding, trying to stop border wall funding. He had lawsuits pertaining to family separation, adding a question about immigration to the census. He had travel ban 1, 2, and 3 lawsuits. He sued over DACA. I mean, Bob Ferguson levied a number of lawsuits against the Trump administration that had to do with his feelings about how Trump was treating immigrants. All right, so Attorney General Bob Ferguson's office saw that segment. They didn't particularly like it, I think it's fair to say. So they've issued me a 3-point email with some corrections that they'd like. So let's review, shall we? And look, I like Brianna. I've his spokesperson. I've known her for a long time, going back to my mainstream media days. So she's sending me an email, and I'll take a look at it. I've gotten things wrong before. I'm not opposed to correcting issues. So she says, "Good morning, Brandi. Just returned from leave. Caught your show from last week. I'd like to request a correction on a few items. Number 1, you said that we filed a lawsuit to, quote, stop border wall funding. That is correct. I did do that." She says that is not accurate. 16 states sued over border wall funding. In fact, Attorney General Ferguson was one of the few Democratic attorney generals that did not join that lawsuit. She goes on to say, "We did, however, file a successful lawsuit challenging a specific $89 million that Republicans and Democrats in Congress lawfully appropriated for the Bangor submarine base at Naval Base Kitsap. A bipartisan group of more than 100 former members of Congress filed a brief in support of our challenge, along with the U.S. House of Representatives and 60 former National Security and State Department officials who served presidents on both parties. The federal judge agreed with us and agreed that the Trump administration's attempt to sweep money away from Washington state was illegal. That lawsuit was bipartisan and advanced Washington's economic interests, national security interests, and the rule of law. We're requesting that you clarify with your audience." So this is a matter of semantics, really, and actually I'll point you to the press release that Attorney General Bob Ferguson's office put out, I think it was in 2019, when they filed this lawsuit. The headline, "AG Ferguson sues to block Trump from diverting billions for the border wall." So the lawsuit and the basis for it was this $89 million that was allocated to the base at Naval Base Kitsap. However, what Trump wanted to take the money for was to help with construction of a border wall. So yes, by suing to stop him, they did actually take money away from Trump that he wanted to use for border wall funding. So I think that's an issue of semantics. However, that's fine. Offering the context is always good. So that is the context of that lawsuit. Let's see. How about the second and third points in her email? Let's see if we have any corrections that are owed. Number 2. You said that our lawsuits over DACA and the census were over Bob Ferguson's, quote, feelings. Yes, I did say that. She said, "Like all our work, these lawsuits were about the law and protecting Washington from harm. In both cases, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the Trump administration's actions were unlawful and harmed the state of Washington and its residents. That's fine. It is my opinion, however, that these were about Bob Ferguson's feelings and his political ambitions. I do host an opinion show, and it is my right to have an opinion on the matter, and I think that he was driven in all of these many lawsuits by his political ambitions, his negative feelings about Donald Trump, and his feelings that Donald Trump was treating immigrants unfairly. I also noted that I would probably feel fine about all of those lawsuits if Attorney General Bob Ferguson had also actively been pursuing lawsuits that could have improved security on the southern border. Sue the drug cartel, if you can figure out a lawsuit around that. I mean, there are other lawsuits that could have helped with public safety issues. There are other instances where he could have spoken out about public safety issues, and he did not. Point number 3, you said Bob Ferguson hasn't done a thing about the fentanyl crisis. That's correct. I did say that. This is not accurate. Our office has recovered $1.1 billion that must be used to address the fentanyl epidemic. We took 3 Fortune 15 companies to trial. We rejected a national settlement in order to get better deals for Washington, leading to more than $150 million more than we would have received had we accepted those national agreements. Those resources are going to every community in the state. They can be used to hire first responders, educate youth, and improve treatment options. Those resources will save lives. We are requesting a correction. So I did say Bob Ferguson hasn't done a dang thing about the fentanyl crisis. And I actually believe that the lawsuits they're referencing have to do with the opioid crisis, which led to a heroin crisis, which is a different crisis than the fentanyl crisis that we're dealing with right now. The opioid companies were loose with prescriptions on pills, and then they tightened that back in, and then people got addicted to heroin. And that was the crux of the lawsuits that Attorney General Bob Ferguson was filing. If she disagrees with that, I've told her in an email that you're free to come back to me and say that that's not true. So we're talking about different drug crises. I mean, I think they're all part of the overall drug crisis that we're dealing with. But when I said that Bob Ferguson hadn't done a dang thing to deal with the fentanyl crisis, I mean that he has not, and in context of the conversation, I was focused on his lack of care and concern for the public safety implications. And as I pointed out in that segment, as I reiterated to her in my response email, Bob Ferguson didn't say anything when the state Supreme Court overturned the state's felony drug possession statute. He didn't use an ounce of his political will to push state lawmakers to come up with a solution. So we had a law on the books that made drug possession and drug use a crime. He didn't say anything when in 2021, his party watered down our state's police pursuit statute to the point where multiple law enforcement agencies, both local, state, and federal, said that that would hinder their ability to interrupt drug traffickers. He didn't say jack about it. He also didn't say jack, even as the state's chief law enforcement officer, about the defunding debate and the defunding movement. He kept his mouth shut. What happened? As a result of that, as a result of the toxic political environment that it created, officers left their jobs in our state at record levels. We continue to have the lowest number of police officers per capita of any state in the nation. That means we have fewer police officers to go out to do proactive patrols, proactive policing when it comes to capturing, disrupting people who are pushing drugs on vulnerable individuals in our community. Bob Ferguson had every chance in the world to prove during his time as Attorney General that he cares about public safety and that he does not want his own party to be watering down laws that help us battle the drug crisis that we're currently in. He didn't do any of those things. And so in my mind, he hasn't done jack to make the fentanyl crisis better. He can hide behind his many lawsuits all he wants, but his lawsuits are one-sided and he uses them to gain political points for his run for governor. And it is our job on this show, and I would argue it's the job of every other media outlet, to point that out, to point out the utter hypocrisy, like the hypocrisy we pointed out about Bob Ferguson pushing since 2017 to ban so-called semi-automatic assault weapons of war, yet he said nothing when those exact weapons were being handed out of the trunk of a car during the autonomous protest zone in Seattle in 2020, and people patrolled for weeks 6 square blocks of Seattle using the very guns that he's used every ounce of political will he has to ban. So this is a guy who only says and does what he can later spin into political points for himself. And I'm not going to correct a dang thing that I said about any of that. All right, another update for you on the Fifth Avenue Theater. They're not asking for any corrections, are they?
No, they just gave us a clarification.
Okay, so let me go through the whole debacle. So Fifth Avenue Theater hosts a global majority night, which they're meaning to say global majority are people who aren't white. And they put out this thing saying you get a discount, essentially, if you're not white, because we want you to enjoy the theater experience. And we've been told that people of color don't feel like they can come and that they belong at the Fifth Avenue Theater. So I posted it last week and I was like, wow, that sounds like racism. You should just put a sign at your door that says, no whites allowed. And so as soon as I spoke out about that and tweeted about it, I noticed that I had been blocked. That they responded by blocking me on Twitter. Nicole, do we have that? Just for evidence, the receipts. I want to make sure people know. And now, before I was blocked, last week, I had gone to their Twitter page and I had looked to see, have they said anything else about the global majority night? No, and that's when I went on blast on Twitter to say, this sounds very racist to me. So anyway, Nicole reached out to them after I complained again about being blocked by them for pointing out that they were being bigots. And little did I know, Monday evening, I go back, I'm like, not blocked anymore. Not blocked anymore. Full access to the Fifth Avenue Theater Twitter account. Thank God. What would I do if I didn't have access to their Twitter account? So Nicole, before I get into their response to our Twitter blocking. They sent you a long email response to our concerns about the spirit of the global majority night. So I guess I can read a little bit of that. Let me read a little bit of that, and then we'll get to their excuse for me being blocked, which I just think is not true. So they said the 5th Global Majority Nights invite Black, Indigenous, and communities of color to be in community while experiencing a show together. Which is like, so you mean that white people aren't part of the community? What is it? This is the exact problem. They go on to say, as with our other affinity-affirming spaces, these evenings of theater actively promote an opportunity for self-identifying patrons to enjoy storytelling and engage with the performance. But why can't they do that with white people?
Well...
Okay, well, you want me to keep reading? Mm-hmm. This event was created in response to a community address need for our global majority audiences to feel welcome and supported in a space that has been predominantly white. In fact, there are certainly still hundreds of seats available throughout the theater in every section for anyone to attend the performance on that date. Our global majority night events typically serve about 100 seats out of 1,886 in the venue. There are approximately 44,000 available for the run of the show. The discount opportunity is an incentive similar to any other affinity night or corporate night where groups belonging to that community receive a discount offer. Not at all because someone can't afford it, but because it entices people to participate. The same process is applied for a variety of partners who book groups with our theater each season. These discounted tickets are not in a specific section or area, but rather located throughout the theater. But here's my thing. You do discounted tickets for a variety of groups, companies that want to come in, quote unquote, affinity groups. Would you do a discounted block of tickets for white people? Would you do a discounted block of tickets specifically for white people? I want an answer to that question. Would you do a discounted block of tickets specifically for white people? If not, this is racist. It's different to try to compare it to, if we have corporate groups coming in, we give them a discount. That's not the same as giving someone a discount on the basis of the color of their skin. Reverse racism is just racism. And then they go on to talk about my blocking on Twitter. Regarding the coverage on the Undivided podcast about the 5th blocking Brandi on Twitter, it seems that she was blocked from the account prior to this event at the 5th. It was not in response to this situation. It's not our practice to block accounts unless they engage in repeated hateful speech. We've upped it. First of all, that's not true because I was able to see their Twitter account last week as I was looking at this, so I don't know why they think I was blocked previously. But let's just pretend for a second that that's true. What would you have blocked me about previously? I've never done a story on the Fifth Avenue Theater, but this line tends to make me think that this is the argument they're making. It is not our practice to block accounts unless they engage in repeated hateful speech. Have I engaged in repeated hateful speech? No, you blocked me because I called you out for being racists. And
criticism. It's a criticism.
Racism.
You were you were criticizing an event of theirs. Blocked.
Yeah, first of all, they didn't have me blocked last week. And if they did, I'm very curious from their position, what was I blocked for then? Was it repeated hateful speech? Because there are like several million Washingtonians who probably agree with me on the vast majority of issues, so you should get to blocking. Like this crazy. So you have anything to add before you read your follow-up?
The reason I included kind of those descriptions because it was a very long email, but
yes.
But she goes at the beginning, she's talking about how they're trying to bring everybody in and you know, they want to make this group feel together and be brought into the theater together. But then she goes on to say, but that's only 100 tickets out of however many tickets there are in the theater, and they don't sit them all together. So you're kind of, it doesn't really make sense the way that they've kind of played with that, I guess, because they're saying, hey, we want these people all to feel welcome together.
Yeah.
But then they don't seat them together, and it's a very small majority of the tickets that they sell that are at a discounted price for members of that community, and then she like compares it to teen night, and I don't think that's the same at all.
It's not the same.
Whatever. And then as far as offering a discount as an incentive, the reason people pick up on that incentive is because they might not have as much money to spend on these events. You know, I mean,
but again, that's assuming that people of color are poor.
Right, exactly. Well, that's what I said in my original email, and she said, no, it's just an incentive to get people excited. Well, But if you're excited by a discount, then you probably don't have the extra money to spend on it, right? So,
but I'd also say, and I want you to read the email you sent her in response, because I think it's very thoughtful and it is in keeping with, it's not just about calling them out for reverse racism. I need to stop doing that. It is about trying to change this culture of creating division where division doesn't exist. We try not to do, we just had this conversation after the show yesterday. We try not to do like one-off outrage stories. You'll notice that there's always a theme within our stories. And if there's an issue we glob onto, it's something we keep up to try to paint a picture of the insanity of it, the lack of common sense in it, or about the way that it's creating division where there shouldn't be division. And that's what this is doing. But I would also say the end-all be-all argument for this, again, is would you give a block of discounted tickets to white people? If you want to post on your page that it's Global Minority Night at the Fifth Avenue Theater, and if you are white, you can get a discount. If you do that, I'll let it go. If you do that, I'll let it go. But I know you won't. So will you read the email that you responded with?
Yes. So I said I appreciate her taking time to make those clarifications. I said, well, we believe educating folks on the history of theater racism in America is extremely important. We also believe our country needs to reunite. While we recognize most people have good intentions, creating events like this reinforce division. If folks are treated poorly while attending your shows, we'd hope that the Fifth would remove the patrons responsible for that behavior. And then I invited her on the show again if she'd like to make any more clarifications.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's what it's really about. It's like, you might think you're doing one thing, but what you're doing is something completely different. And you are trying to right wrongs of the past through wrongs. And that's not right.
Well said.
Thank you. Oh, wow, I'm good at my job. Anyway, so a couple updates to stories. Very curious what you guys think about. Have we gotten on Bob Ferguson's nerves? Are we poking the bear?
I just really want him to come on.
I do too. I've interviewed the man many times, and I should reiterate, I don't think he's a bad person. I don't know enough about him to think he's a bad person. I know some might disagree. Some have heard things about him being very vindictive. In fact, I was having a text exchange with someone who's involved in politics in Washington, and they wanted to, come down harder on him, but said they were worried about retribution toward their family. And I was like, I don't know about that. I mean, if there's a handful of people he would like want to seek retribution against, I'd probably be in the handful. But he hasn't done anything personally to me.
Yeah,
anyway,
maybe you're not on the list
What
yet.
I'm trying to say
You're trying to get on the list.
When I have sat down with Bob Ferguson many times throughout my mainstream news career, I always enjoyed our conversations. I usually didn't agree with where he took things. I thought he was overtly political in an office that, in my opinion, should not be overtly political. But in contrast to Jay Inslee, it was painful torture to sit down with Jay Inslee for an interview. Painful torture. And with Bob Ferguson, I never found it that way. So I'm fine doing an interview, and I'll be fair to him and all of that, but I clearly have, in my opinion phase, taken a very hard stance against him being governor. I don't think he should be the governor, because I think he will continue the state down this negative path that we're on, and he'll do it with a level of momentum that we will not be able to come back from.
Yeah, I agree. I think the reason you said he's a better interview and things like that are
he's
exactly
intelligent.
Is exactly the reason we're nervous about it, because I think that intelligence can be put to terrible use.
I agree.
I think that he will use that intelligence to manipulate and to
serve a political agenda,
serve an agenda and take the state in the wrong direction.
Yeah,
it's very scary.
So it's not personal. I know it feels personal at times. It's not personal in the sense that it's against him. It's personal in the sense that it's about my care and concern for the state. I'm worried about what it means for my family. I'm worried about what it means for your family. I'm worried about what it means for all your families. That is not the direction I want the state to go. So I don't have a personal beef against Attorney General Bob Ferguson, except for I don't want to see him in the governor's office. That is the extent of my personal beef with him. Anyway, okay. We've been talking about first mark. Yes, yet. I'll always leave room for it. We've been talking about First Mark Insurance because I think it's a fantastic opportunity to learn more about the insurance you currently have, learn more about your insurance needs, save money in the process. What could go? What's wrong with that? That's a win-win-win. Firstmarkinsurance.com. Mike and I took the First Mark Challenge in the spring. We have now moved all our insurance over to First Mark. We're very, very happy with the service that we get, with the coverage that we get, and the price. Dave Taylor is the CEO of First Mark, also a Marine, and he talked about what the point and purpose of the First Mark Challenge is.
We believe and we say that we will help 100% of the people that we work with. Okay. Now that doesn't mean necessarily that 100% of the people we work with are going to become First Mark clients, but we believe that we will actually help 100% of the people, whether that be stay with your current carrier, but let's modify your coverage a bit so you're better protected, or ultimately, hopefully come over to First Mark. We're going to put you with a different company and give you better coverage, right? So the challenge is really challenging individuals to give us an opportunity to prove that to them. That's really what the First Mark Challenge is.
Yeah, it doesn't cost you any money, just costs you a little bit of time, and it's totally worth it. Also, everyone needs insurance, and we would sure love for you to do business with our sponsors to the show because it shows them that you value the partnership. Firstmarkinsurance.com, firstmarkinsurance.com. They work for you. All right, coming up next is going to be the shortest unbelievable segment to date. Let's get to it. Governor Inslee either completely lacks self-awareness, which is possible, or he is blatantly ignoring something that he's done to make a political point, which is also possible. Both of those things could be true, but he put out just about the dumbest tweet I have seen from his account and the least intellectually honest tweet. It had to do with the issue of abortion, but I want to read it for you because I am sure that you're going to think the exact same thing about it that I do. He wrote, "Politicians should not dictate the kind of health care patients receive." Politicians should not dictate the kind of health care patients receive. He goes on to say, including abortion care. Providers and patients are free to make those choices for themselves in Washington state. Man, that's really interesting because I swear I tend to recall something having to do with Washington state dictating the kind of health care that patients receive. Nicole, can you jog my memory?
I remember jobs being threatened.
Yeah. Was there something that...
Or actually being taken away.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. The vaccine mandate. Interesting. Politicians should not dictate the kind of health care patients receive.
Unless
I agree.
it's him.
Unless it's him. But I agree with the sentiment. That's why I'm pro-choice up to a certain point. And it's why I believe that people should not be threatened to lose their livelihoods if they don't get a vaccine. Unbelievable. All right, let's dip outside of Washington state momentarily. Before we get to Florida Report, I had to play this clip that's been circulating online from New York City Mayor Eric Adams. It has been fascinating to watch his whole trajectory on the issue of immigration. And you have these sanctuary cities, and then you had immigrants who crossed illegally being bussed into these cities. And to watch slowly over time how his tone on that situation has changed is really enlightening. So here's the clip.
We're getting no support on this national crisis, and we're receiving no support. And let me tell you something, New Yorkers. Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City.
This issue, illegal immigration and immigrants being bussed to his city at record numbers, will destroy New York City. You're talking about a city that prides itself on being a melting pot of the world, but you've had a lot of people come there, going back to the early days of this country, from all over the world legally. The issue that's happening now is, of course, record numbers of undocumented immigrants being shipped up from border towns to New York City's doorstep. And now he says that this is an issue that will destroy the city. This clip has really changed my mind on the busing of immigrants, on the immigrant flights out of red states. If you recall, when I first started talking about what was happening in Texas, for instance, where they were busing people to outside the White House and outside Congress, when they were busing people to these sanctuary cities, I thought that it was playing politics with people's lives. I now realize that that was probably in the entirety of the immigration debate, as long as I've been doing this job, the single most effective thing in changing public opinion about security at the southern border. Where you now have the mayor of New York City who's saying if this continues, it will destroy our city as we know it. And they're just getting a tiny taste, a tiny fraction of a taste of that crisis that is being experienced in Texas, in Arizona. And while I can still understand the frustration of people who are like, you can't put these people on a bus and ship them somewhere where they've never been before and drop them off to make a political point. That political point, I have now come to realize, might be the only thing that disrupts this cycle. So good for Eric Adams for at least coming to this realization. I think he and people of his political ideology contributed to this, contributed and allowed an environment where this got so bad. But I'll never fault anyone for changing their mind when presented with different evidence, even if it was a little selfish, because they're changing their mind when presented with evidence because now it's impacting his city. I'm glad that he's on the side of common sense now, and the question is, what are you going to do next? And how are you going to get your fellow Democratic mayors, Democratic governors to finally speak up about these issues? That was one of my other concerns with Bob Ferguson. Not one time has he spoken up publicly about the need to secure the southern border. Not one time. Not one time has Jay Inslee done it. Has Dow Constantine done it. And that is how all these drugs are coming into our community and killing people on our streets. But because politics is more important to them than anything, they won't simply say so. They won't use any of their political influence or clout to save lives. And those are people who shouldn't be 100 yards from any sort of position of authority. All right. It is Thursday after all. Big thank you to Miranda, who helped launch our merch store, put it all together. Her and Daryl were teamwork in that thing. She has some interesting stories this week, including a story about a three-legged bear. Let's get to it in our segment, Florida Report.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
Miranda.
Hello.
Hello. So we talked earlier on the show. We launched our merch page today. You created it, so if anybody has problems with it, that's your fault. I like your shirt. You were a model for our crop top because you're so pretty and thin. I was like, of course, her picture would be just like literally a supermodel.
No.
So, but then everybody's gonna be like, well, I'm not gonna look like that in a crop top. Nicole made fun of me about the crop top decision because she's like, I like crop tops because I wear high pants, like grandma pants. So I'm like, a crop top doesn't mean that your whole midriff has to show. Yeah, you hike your pants up. And Nicole's like, those aren't going to sell. And then we had our first round and we were at this Freedom Fest. And like I was trying to pitch people on the crop tops. And the only people who bought them because they felt bad for me because I was obviously distraught. But they're awesome. Look how good you look in it.
No, they do. And honestly, they're not that short. You can wear like some mid-rise jeans and you're not going to see your belly. They're just cute and,
No
show off a
returns.
nice belt or something.
No return, sorry. Or you can show your belly. I don't judge. Do what you want to do.
What you want.
Okay, let's get to it. You guys obviously have been just bombarded with some storms there. President Biden went down to tour the damage. Did not see Ron DeSantis while he was there.
No, he didn't. DeSantis, his representatives made a statement saying that it was more about the amount of effort that goes into, having a president and a governor meet up during a disaster in those rural areas. The security and like the logistics of it is just kind of like a waste of time. And I have to agree with that. He could have maybe jumped on a phone call or something with them just to discuss some stuff. But, I think that it's much ado about nothing sometimes when these leaders show up at these disaster areas, because there really is a lot of more effort put into the security of the politician than, the job at hand, which right now is cleanup efforts and helping people find safe places to sleep at night until their homes are back.
Yeah, and I think the media has a lot to do with it. And we talked about this with Biden and Maui and stuff, but I think sometimes, for instance, during the pandemic in Washington State, and we were ground zero for it, I remember that Mike Pence came, and I thought that was really nice at the time, considering how much our governor hated that administration. And to see them together, I think there is this sense of like, okay, there are still things that we can put, political disagreements aside for. So sometimes I think that's helpful to see. But I tend to agree. I don't think that a lack of a visible presence somewhere means someone's not doing something behind the scenes. So yes. Okay. There have been a lot of focus on LGBTQIA plus issues. Did I get that right? In Florida and beyond. And now Florida has a sanctuary city for the gay community.
Yeah, so the city commission of, I think it was Lake Worth. Yeah, Lake Worth Beach. They voted last week to create a sanctuary city for the LGBTQA plus community.
You missed an I.
And
You missed the I. Canceled.
I didn't even know there was an I.
I don't know what it stands for. Nicole, can you look up what the I stands for?
Yeah, I didn't know there was an I. I'm just going to say the whole alphabet so we can make sure it's all covered. So they voted to have a sanctuary city in Lake Worth. I don't know exactly what that means, but I do think it means that they're going to put a lot of effort into making sure that people feel safe when they come and they travel. They did mention that their tourism has dropped off a bit. It is the summer, and when people don't travel here in the summer, so that could have a lot to do with it too. But I think that they'll probably just put a lot of effort into, Pride Month and just different like activities and things like that, just to make people feel like they're seen, heard, and safe.
Yeah, and Nicole has the I. Can I guess? Do you have a guess what the I is, Miranda? Are we offending people right now? No, I'm going to say it's fine. Inquisitive.
I'm going to say intergender.
Oh, you're close.
Oh, is it intersex?
It's intersex.
Ah, I should have known that.
And
Sorry.
then A?
A is asexual.
Yep.
Oh, okay. What is the plus?
Everything else.
Everything else.
Okay, anyway, yeah, this is interesting to me because I have never thought of Florida as anti-gay. I mean, how many times have we been to Miami Beach? And I'm like, so I know that there are probably pockets in Florida, and just because Governor DeSantis doesn't want that ideology and certain things pushed on children doesn't mean that they hate gay people. So, I mean, if a city wants to be a sanctuary for the LGBTQ community, fine, but I would argue that is kind of meaningless because it's like, okay, if you don't make that qualifier, are you not welcoming to the gay community? Yeah. Are you not going to treat them well?
Yeah, I think that it has more to do with people outside of Florida and the media and how the media is portraying Florida. So as well-meaning and as good as it really of an initiative as it is kind of maybe a performative politics, and hopefully it hits a headline and people see that like, oh, we can visit Fort Worth because, everything we hear about Florida is the opposite of what we're hearing about Fort Worth. So maybe they'll go to Fort Worth Beach and enjoy themselves.
Yeah, fine. I mean, I'm not going to lose sleep over it, but it's like in Seattle, there's some people who have those signs in their storefronts that are like, gosh, I wish I could remember. It's like, in this place, we welcome, or we think love is love, and we welcome disabled people and whatever it is. And I'm like, so if you don't have that sign, you don't? Like, why do you need to tell people that you're not going to discriminate against gay people or the disabled? It's like, I just assume, unless proven otherwise, that individuals of all different types are welcome in any establishment. So it's just weird virtue signaling. Anyway, there was a bear story out of Florida I wanted to discuss because the bears have been a-buzzing around our house. So I think I mentioned on the show last year, we had a bear and our fence was old. It needed to be replaced. It straight up did the Kool-Aid man through the fence. Like, hey guys, or whatever the Kool-Aid man does. And it was like, holy crap, a hole in our fence. So we replaced the thing. And then this year the bear comes back and basically tears our gate off to get to a garbage can that had nothing in it. So anyway, you have a bear that is on quite an adventure down in Florida.
Yeah, it's a bear that is local and well known to the locals of Lake Mary, which is a suburb of Orlando. This bear has 3 legs and it is locally known as tripod. Some people on their like Ring camera caught this particular bear breaking in to their garage and drinking some White Claws.
That's basically water, right?
Basically fizzy water. Yeah, it's pretty funny. I mean, I think everybody in America has a bear story, so I always appreciate the bear stories because they transcend all the states. Everybody gets a bear.
Yeah, whenever like the bear is in the neighborhood at night and Mike finds out, like the other day, we had one of our windows open, like a high up window, and I heard rustling and I'm like, what are the neighbors doing over there? And then it got louder and I went back there and the bear is in our garbage. So I go up and I wake Mike up. I'm like, the bear's here. He springs out of bed and he straps on his headlamp and he's out. He's like, I'm going to find that bear. I was like, what are you going to do to it? Like, we moved into its neighborhood, leave the bear alone. So anyway. All right, Miranda, good stuff today. Thank you for your diligent work in you and Daryl helping launch our merch store. Thank you too, Nicole. I mean, she's like, whatever. And I want people, because they see how good you look in the crop top, to buy those, because if they don't, Nicole's going to have things to say to me. Nicole and I decided our next merch launch, we're going to have the Nicole collection and the Brandi collection. And then we'll know for sure who has better taste based on the sales.
Well, I want to see some beanies and some sweaters on the next round.
Yeah,
So.
we'll work on that. Okay, taking suggestions. All right, Miranda, thank you.
Bye.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
Wow, we're having way too much fun on the podcast today. My really deep, probing live chat question is, were the crop tops a bad idea? And I'll have 68% say no so far. But I do like the idea of having, maybe when we're ready to, because this is the Common Sense collection. We already have orders coming in. To have maybe Nicole, Brandi, and Daryl, where we each design one piece, and then whichever one sells the most, that person wins whatever sort of bragging rights.
I kind of like that.
Because you think you have better taste than me. And my taste is impeccable.
I think I know the people.
Okay.
It's not better taste. Everybody has different, but I think I know the people.
Yeah.
But no, I'm excited about this merch. It's fun.
I am too. Yeah. Let's just dive into questions and comments. And then we'll do a little, we'll dive into questions and comments first. All right, on drugs, the drugs being detected in the public transit, sometimes at a rate of 100% for air samples. Sasho Windfeather. I was a bus driver for Snohomish County. I did not like doing the Swift line because people would smoke stuff on the bus. Was not great. Plus, we worried we'd get a positive drug test. The bus companies don't actually care about what happens to the drivers. They basically tell us just keep going. And that's the thing. What is King County Metro doing for bus drivers who have to sit in those conditions all day long? I mean, what if they do test positive for some sort of substance? What if they do have long-term health implications of driving a bus for 40 hours a week, breathing in meth? I mean, that's ridiculous. I do, again, give them credit for telling UW, can you study this issue? Like, take swabs, figure out. But also, doesn't that seem like a very backward way to do it? How about you focus on stopping people from doing drugs on your buses? Instead, you're going to pay UW to do a study where they're swapping seats and taking samples of the air. And that's so you can figure out, how about you just get to the root of the issue and try to elect people and encourage people with political will to make sure that we're not having this blatant open air drug use on buses and trains. Well, that's a thought. So it's such a government way of doing it. Yeah, we've got drug users on the buses like every day. We'll pay you, a few $100,000 in taxpayer funds. Could you just go in and take some swabs and see if this is going to have long-term health implications for our drivers? The government's ridiculous. Michael Dean says, sounds like $1 million or so needs to be spent building a bus cleaning facility that will resolve this issue. Maybe some of the funding from the homeless industrial complex can be used. Yeah, but that's the same thing. It's like, we're going to pay to clean the buses, but we're not going to put any effort at all into making sure the buses aren't filled with drugs in the first place. Charlotte says, I watched someone shoot up on the streetcar and put the syringe and needle in the streetcar heater vent.
Ugh.
That's disgusting. It was so scary. Yeah, and I've walked downtown Seattle. I was doing a story at the time where I had what I'm assuming is crack smoke, like blown in my direction. I'm like, oh my God. Y says, very small amount of fentanyl can be lethal, so this is very concerning. I used to bust a UW for my work. Smelling pot was bad enough. I hate the smell of pot. I cannot imagine riding them out. That is true. How many times do we hear from health officials that an amount of fentanyl that's equivalent to the prick of a pin can kill you? So are you expecting these fentanyl users to not like discard or put any of it anywhere, and you've got traces of it on the seats? And you're saying, oh, we don't think it's in amounts that can hurt someone. On SPD, finally getting out from underneath the thumb of the federal government, Daniel's Circus Adventures says, since the majority of the consent decree has been lifted, will SPOG and SPD finally get a new contract after almost 3 years since the last one expired? One would hope so. One would hope that when you're down 600 to 700 officers, you don't make them wait long periods of time for a new contract, but apparently the city just doesn't have a lick of common sense. On the high gas prices that are only going to get higher, Andy says, high gas prices. Apparently Inslee didn't get what he wanted during COVID by shutting small businesses down. He's going to continually price them out with high fuel cost. Maybe so we're giving a $5 discount to undivided subscribers. Maybe just to like have some positive $5 discount on our merch store. Maybe to have some positive out of the high gas prices, every month the discount is equivalent to the price per gallon of gasoline. So then, if the gas prices go up, at least their discount amount will go up on the merch store. I kind of like that.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe something to consider. Anyway, Kila Kolani says, if gas goes up much more, I'll have to change jobs. I drive 44 miles a day for work now. I wonder if that's one way or back. So is it 88? Not much for many I know. I like my job, but I soon won't be able to afford the gas to get there. And that's a very real thing. And that's what the politicians don't understand. For AJ Inslee to say, oh, we're not calling a special session. It's like you have people who are having to make significant life decisions based on what you've done with gas prices. You could easily bring them back down. You don't have to get rid of your whole program, although I think that would be a good thing. But you can cap the auctions and the prices, so that the offset and the amount that these companies are having to buy those offsets for doesn't mean they have to pass so much on to the consumer. All right, on Bob Ferguson, Todd Welch said, Ferguson is worse than Inslee. Ferguson is actually smart. He will work harder to implement his policies. That's what Nicole said. Josie Manor on Inslee saying, oh man, I got to go back to the tweet now because I just got to read it again. On Inslee saying, hold on here. Politicians should not dictate the kind of health care patients receive. What a stunning idea. Josie said, ugh, I lost my job for not getting the vax. This guy. It's ridiculous. Sorry you lost your job. That is insane. On New York City Mayor Eric Adams saying that illegal immigration as it is happening right now will destroy the city. Chrisman Wilkie says, Brandi, thank you for admitting the obvious about illegal immigration. As a sanctuary city, be careful what you ask for. Yeah, it's one of the issues I'm just coming around on when it comes to what they're doing with this busing. Carter Edwards says they are not immigrants, they are border crossers. Immigrants come here legally and work toward meeting all the standards of becoming U.S. citizens, like the Persian man who owns the business I work for. Yeah, you're right. I should be more careful in how I refer to these individuals. On the merch store and the show, Kathy says, Brandi, where's your ring? I had to drop it off yesterday to get fitted to my wedding band because I have one of those. My wedding band is one of those, what do you call it? Goes around it. It's a jacket. It's a jacket, and so they need my ring to make sure the jacket fits. So I'm not going to have it until like right before the wedding. I'm free. I'm like a bird. I don't want to fly away.
The last couple of weeks of your life without a ring.
Right. Then it'll be on permanently. It was funny that I got Mike's, when I was there dropping off my ring, I picked up his wedding band. Mm-hmm. Then I got home. I'm like, I have to talk to you about something. I want you to know that I love you. And then I got on my knee and I proposed to him with his wedding band. He wasn't entertained.
Can't imagine he was.
Two Ladies Midwest Adventurers says, bandanas, please. Leah Workout says, tanks for merch. Okay, like I said, we'll do a little, this is our first collection. Finally got it up and running. And then we'll have a little collection competition. Okay. Although Daryl's way hipper than us because he's younger. So I'm kind of worried about what he'd come up with and outselling us.
Our listeners are hip and cool.
No, I'm saying Daryl is way hipper than us.
Oh, you mean he would beat us?
Yes, he's like,
gotcha.
he knows the trends and stuff. So let me see.
I'm confident in my choice.
Michelle Bassford says you could always wear a tank top or camisole under the crop top. Exactly. You don't have to just show your belly.
Mm-hmm.
Although were the crop tops a bad idea? Yes, 38%. No, 63%. So 62%. All right. Let me see. Carter Edwards says, well, it didn't take long to cut out my tongue. Is that you, Nicole, or is this YouTube? Oh, he thinks he's being censored?
Yeah.
Yeah, what'd you say?
To clarify, we do not delete comments.
Yeah, even if I wanted to, I don't have the time to get on and delete comments. What I actually really love about Patreon and locals is that they don't have any infrastructure to be able to delete comments if they even wanted to. So whereas, some other outlets like Facebook might auto hide comments. Right. Patreon and locals doesn't do that. And so it's completely unfiltered. Sometimes people will say, hey, are you deleting my comment? And I said, no, you have to go up and click the box that says show all comments, or else it'll just show you the last couple too. Usually that solves the issue. But with Facebook, YouTube, if there's some keywords in there they don't like, what'd you say? Or just keep scrolling up and find it. I don't know. But no, we don't delete any comments. I suppose if I spotted one that was truly horrendous and egregious and obviously dangerous or something, then I might be like, we got to delete that. But I've never deleted a comment on YouTube. So 9 times out of 10, it's big tech. It's big tech censoring us, and we're still at their mercy. We're still at their mercy. Okay, before we get to sanity check, Eastside Weight Loss Clinic. Nicole's looking at me like, EastsideWeightLossClinic.com. I'm down more than 35 pounds on the program. I continue to get awesome stories from you guys. Like every week I'm getting success stories from people down 20 pounds, 25 pounds, 30 pounds. And you get results really quick on the program, which is what I really liked. I lost most of that weight in just 2 months. I have 2 friends now who started the program. One a couple weeks ago, they're doing great. I have one who started a week ago and he's down like 11 or 12 pounds. So it's not magic. It certainly requires commitment, but there's no prepackaged meals, no counting calories, no hypnosis or anything like that, no strenuous workout routines. So if you think the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic plan might be for you, if you've been hearing wonderful things about it on our show, schedule a free 15-minute consultation, EastsideWeightLossClinic.com, EastsideWeightLossClinic.com. Chat with Dr. Ryan Coogan and his team. The consultation is completely free. Again, you can do it virtually. You can do the entire program virtually. So even if you're living in Timbuktu, you can do it online, EastsideWeightLossClinic.com. Okay. On Sundays with Subscribers this week, we have a wonderful interview for you. We're going to be joined by Coach Joe Kennedy, the now former Bremerton football coach who fought all the way up to the Supreme Court for 8 years after he lost his job for praying on the 50-yard line after games. The news we told you on the show yesterday was after the Supreme Court ruled in his favor, he was reinstated as a coach at Bremerton High School, but he resigned yesterday after only his first game. So he joined us to talk about why. But I wanted to play for Sanity Check today. Do you want to get to our closing Sanity Check? Nicole's like, when are you going to play the musical bed? We can't do it without it. I almost forgot. There was a moment at the end of the interview that I want to preview for you that I think speaks to, because I have disagreed with Coach Joe Kennedy on this issue, and I've told that to him to his face. We had an event a couple months ago. I talked about it in a speech I gave. He knows that this is an issue that I am not on the same side on, but I have admired his fight and him fighting for what he believed in, even at great personal cost. But in closing our interview, which again, the full interview will air this Sunday on Sundays with Subscribers, I asked him about disagreement. I asked him about what he would say to people who continue to disagree with what he did and with the outcome of his case.
You and I, we never seen eye to eye on that. And that's an awesome thing about being an American. Everybody has the right to have their own opinion and their own thoughts. And you know me, I am going to support and defend your right just as much as anybody else. My rights aren't any more important than anybody else's, but I do have the rights. You have the rights, and so does everybody. That's what America's about. And that's what I learned as a Marine, that we could be the best of friends and never see eye to eye in most things. It shouldn't stop us from being people and being Americans.
I could not agree more. You can watch our full interview this Sunday on Sundays with Subscribers. You do have to sign up to get those episodes. undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. I really enjoyed our conversation in talking about not only, what led to his decision to walk away from the one thing he's been fighting 8 years to get back, but also what he learned about himself, what he learned about our government, what he learned about our country during this whole 8-year saga. So great episode of Sundays with Subscribers for you this week. All right, while you're at undividedpod.com, signing up to be a subscriber so you can catch the Coach Joe Kennedy interview, don't forget we launched our merch store today. Hats, t-shirts. Honestly, my favorite hat is? Because I call it the Common Sense Collection. You know which one it is, don't you?
Well, I think it's a Make America.
It says Make Common Sense Great Again.
Yeah.
You know why it's my favorite?
Why?
I'm going to wear it in Seattle, and then from a distance, people will be so triggered, and then they'll get up close and be like, oh, never mind. Makes Common Sense Great Again.
It is really cool.
Yeah, and if you're a subscriber, we have a special promo code. It's already been posted to Patreon and Locals. We posted it during the show today, so please go use it. Take advantage of it. That's our thank you to you for supporting our show and our mission to give common sense a comeback. undividedpod.com. That was our final live show of the week. What a great one it is. We went over by 10 minutes, but that's fine. Even though I talked so fast during the entire show today, because I'm just excited that it's the end of the week. Again, great Sundays with Subscribers coming up for you. So I will see subscribers on Sunday. I'll see the rest of you back on the live show on Monday.